a very, very important part of regenerative agriculture is observation. As we've went down this path and improved soil health, which improves insect health, which improves bird populations and wildlife, our forage quality has been increasing as we're doing this as well, and the diversity of plants is greatly increasing. In the pastures, we're over 100 species of plants now. There's a saying with nature: you pull a string, they're all connected. I think that's very true.
Welcome to the 330th installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's podcast on family farming, regenerative agriculture, community food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. There's no other way to say it. These are dark times for small and medium-sized dairy farmers. The latest Census of Agriculture shows that Minnesota lost nearly 1,500 dairy farms between 2017 and 2022. The news is even worse in Wisconsin, which lost almost double the number of dairies during the same period, representing a 30% drop. Meanwhile, large-scale CAFOs that house thousands or even tens of thousands of cows are growing at an unprecedented rate, threatening the environment and resulting in the kind of overproduction that leaves little room for smaller farms. This is having devastating impacts on rural communities. These changes in the dairy business are the result of, among other things, government policies that favor a consolidated model and a processing, distribution, and marketing system controlled by major corporations that benefit from having fewer farmers on the land. Given all that, why is it that when I stepped into Derek Schmitz's dairy barn on a recent winter day, I found that the 30-year-old farmer had a smile on his face? After all, even though the land he farms sits in the number one dairy county in Minnesota, I passed farm after farm where cows were no longer present. Some of the farmsteads had even been bulldozed to make way for endless corn and soybean fields or fancy McMansions. Derek, who farms with his wife Taylor near Cold Spring, is definitely going against the grain when it comes to dairy industry trends. He milks 70 cows and has a long-term goal of expanding to 120. To put that in context, the average dairy herd size in the United States is now well over 320 cows. He milks in an old-school barn that sits on 225 acres of rented land. He owns one tractor and a bale unwrapper and has invested little in housing the cows, choosing to keep them outside as much as possible. And at a time when massive production is equated with profitability, Derek focuses more on return on investment. In his case, that means keeping expenses to a minimum and not pushing his herd to produce as much milk as possible. In fact, instead of a 2-a-day routine, Derek now milks just once daily. He finds such a system is less stressful for the cows as well as the farmer and results in more money in the bank. At times, he's estimated he's producing milk at about half the cost of other farmers. A critical component of the Schmitz dairy operation's success starts literally from the ground up. Of all the inputs on a dairy farm, feed is the most expensive, and Derek feels he's been able to keep his feed costs under control by allowing the cows to harvest their own forage through regenerative grazing. This is a system that relies on rotating animals through paddocks in a way that prevents overgrazing and spreads manure and urine in a manner that builds soil biology. Such a system is also based on giving those paddocks long rest periods, which helps keep the plant systems healthy above and below the ground, while extending the grazing season for more months of the year. Regenerative grazing focuses on developing pastures that are made up of diverse plant systems, which helps build a resilient soil biome that produces forages consistently, even in extreme weather conditions. The Schmitzes have been dairy farming on rented land for a decade, and it hasn't always been easy, but Derek is convinced that regenerative grazing is the key to long-term success. He feels that emulating nature and relying on perennial plant systems provides the kind of ecological and economic sustainability needed to remain a viable farm long into the future. That's why he spends plenty of time observing the connections between a healthy, grass-based ecosystem, healthy cows, and a healthy bottom line. To him, they're all inextricably linked. This way of low-input farming is also allowing the Schmitzes to enter the organic milk market this spring, which will result in premium prices for what the cows are producing. On April 5th, 2024 during the Regenerative Livestock Symposium at the University of Minnesota, Derek will be speaking about the role emulating nature plays in his farm's success. For more information on that symposium, check out the podcast page for Ear to the Ground 330 at landstewardshipproject.org. In the meantime, here's a conversation I had with the farmer while we took shelter from the winter wind in the dairy barn. We talked about why a system based on building soil health with livestock gives this young farmer a reason to feel positive about farming and the role it can play in supporting his family, nature, and a healthier food system.
We've always grazed and believed in grazing. We just took us a few years to find regenerative grazing, and that's really made the biggest change for us.
And what was it about regenerative grazing that really drew you?
I had a few people that I really looked up to who challenged the way I thought. The idea of farming, of emulating nature while farming, just really appealed to me. And I think that's what drove me to it, because I have a love of nature and wildlife, and the idea of that you could farm while benefiting all those parts of the world are really nice.
Yeah, I just wondered, Derek, if you could just give kind of your, off the top of your head, what your definition of a regenerative farm is.
I would say a regenerative farm it's a way of farming while promoting soil health, community health, the health of the farmer, and the financial health of the farmer as well, and the ecological health of the area.
And you said you were drawn to that because you have an interest in wildlife and kind of the environmental aspects of it. But I know one of the things, I was looking at one of your case studies, you've really kind of crunched the numbers on the economics of this. Because, it's great if you're seeing more birds and you feel like you're improving the land, but if you can't make a living on the land and, make it viable economically, that it doesn't do you much good. But it sounds like you really feel like you said you've been doing this for about 10 years, that you're kind of hitting your stride a little bit financially.
Mm-hmm. I feel like the weight's starting to lift. With starting I think probably any farming enterprise, you're going to have a period at the beginning where it's just tough. You're trying to put together the right herd of livestock, or finding the right adapted livestock, I guess, and putting together whatever equipment you may need, and just figuring out a system that works for you. That's just tough. So in the earlier years, we didn't have as much focus on the wildlife parts as much, simply because partly because we didn't know that we could do both. Also because I just heard somebody say it really well this last week: you can't be red, or you can't be green if you're in the red. So it makes now that we're starting to become more profitable, it's easier to put more attention towards those wildlife portions, but they're not mutually exclusive. We can do both at the same time, and we've found as we work to benefit the wildlife portions of the farm, or benefit wildlife, we're actually increasing our own productivity and profitability as well.
What are some of the, I guess, connections you're seeing as far as, some of the wildlife maybe you've seen that maybe weren't on the farm before?
So as we've discovered regenerative grazing and adaptive grazing and became good at it, a big problem in the grazing world, and it's especially prominent in the dairy grazing world, is these very short, very regular grazing rotations or rest periods. These, graze every 24 days or 26 days or 15 days. There's not enough tall forage there for birds to nest in well or insects to hide in. So as we've added days to our rest periods. Now we're doing some rest periods of, our average rest period is probably close to 50 days or 60 days, but we've had some rest periods as long as 90 or 95. The bird population has just exploded, and we're seeing probably 3 or 4 times as many birds as we used to. Our irrigators are just covered in bird poop because there's just thousands of birds out there, and we're seeing nesting populations. Every year there's probably a dozen or more pheasants nesting in the pasture. And we have another interesting thing is last year I found 6 mallard duck nests, and we're a half mile from water. So we must just have the right area for them to come and feel safe. And with birds comes predators, so we see lots of predators too, and it's just really great to see.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're in a situation where when you see more birds, that's a good indicator that your forage health is really getting to where you want it to be, and that your productivity, and that you're able to kind of equate indicators like more bird life with better production in your cows?
Yeah, well, yeah, the bird population's increasing because the prey for the birds population is increasing, which means we have more insects. I mean, the pasture is just alive when you split the canopy and look down amongst it. And the birds are in their taking their harvest, and it's not like we have insect pressure on the plants. I think it's just a good house for them. And there's a saying with nature: you pull a string, they're all connected. I think that's very true.
It helps you, I would think, when you're going out, moving the fencing and that if you can start to go, oh, I'm seeing this, that means maybe I'm going to be seeing more milk in the tank, or I'm at least going to have more profitability there.
Yeah, that's very true. That's a very, very important part of regenerative agriculture is observation. And as we've went down this path and improved soil health, which improves insect health, which improves bird populations and wildlife, our forage quality has been increasing as we're doing this as well. And the diversity of plants is greatly increasing. In the pastures, we're over 100 species of plants now, and that gives those cows the choice. Like in some of Fred Provenz's work, they talk about how cows will eat, 3 to 5 plants a day for the majority of their diet, but they'll eat up to 50 or 75 when given the opportunity. And when they can have that choice, they will. We've got to look at the plants. That's a pharmacological center. That's a nutrition center. They can find everything they need. So we're seeing cow health skyrocket. We have higher quality milk, higher component milk, and actually we've seen a slight uptick in production too. So it's a win-win-win-win.
And it sounds like it really starts with that soil health, that's the base of everything. Was it a pretty steep learning curve for you to start to really look at the soil itself and try to figure out how to build it? One of the things I read in a case study on yours was done on your farm here is that, and this sounds like a no-duh thing, but it is a lot of things. One of the things farmers don't think about. You started taking a shovel out with you out into the pastures, out into the paddocks, and that sounds like that's just a really key thing. Just something as basic as turning up some of that soil and taking a look at it.
Mm-hmm. So I'd been reading Alan Williams and Gabe Brown stuff for probably 15 years. And at first I thought they were kind of nuts when they're talking about bringing a shovel out there and, long rest periods. I thought there's no way that works for cows. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of stuck on like I said, we'd always grazed, but we always thought we needed a lot of the conventional tools as well. We had the TMR mixer and the tractors and lots of supplementation. And honestly, we were to the point where we just couldn't afford that stuff anymore. So I had to get humbled a little bit and start listening a little closer to Alan and Gabe. And I started taking a shovel out there, turning over the soil, seeing what was happening. Initially, when I extended rest periods, I thought I would kind of prove Alan wrong. and that's not how it worked. So it just started working, and then, like I said, the observation's so critical. I just started paying close attention to what was going on because I knew there was no spending my way out of the problems I had with extra supplements and stuff. I had to listen to what they had to say, and it was the turning point for us.
Can you give me a little background on what this farm, before you came here, what was it, a dairy operation or a cropping operation, or what was their land use here?
So this farm was, the dairy was operated as a conventional dairy, but they had been soil health minded since the 70s. When I came here 4 years ago now, they were synthetic free for I think 6 years when I came. So it was just a matter of following that 6th soil health principle when I came here and integrating the livestock. About half the farm was seeded down into perennials that they did the summer before I came. So in the next couple of years after that, we got the rest of the farm seeded down and was really able to apply the livestock.
That was the one thing they were missing of the 5 principles, was integrating the livestock.
Yes. Yep.
So they had not done dairy for a while, it sounds like.
They had done dairy for a long time, but not a grazing dairy. It was
just
a conventional. Cows hadn't been grazed here in probably 30 years or more, or 40 years.
How long did it take for you to start to see some changes when did you introduce grazing right away on the operation when you came here?
Yeah, I started grazing immediately, and within I mean, I don't even think I was through my first round of grazing yet, and I was seeing morphological changes in the plants, and the pasture mix that they had seeded down was pretty diverse, and because they had been synthetic free for a while, the insect populations were pretty good. We've taken them to another level since then, but this farm was kind of an oasis in a corn and soybean world.
Speaking of this farm, you said this is the third farm you've been on since you started dairying on your own there. And you're renting this place, is that right? That surprised me a little bit in that I think it can be difficult for farmers who are renting sometimes to invest in long-term soil health building because they're like, well, I'm not sure how long I'll be here. But it sounds like you have the confidence to build that soil health, and I guess you must have a pretty good relationship with the owners. Or talk a little bit about that, because that can be a real deterrent sometimes for people to build long-term soil health when they're on a rental type situation.
Yeah, I have a very good relationship with the landlord, and we think a lot on the same page as far as we want to keep improving the land. And I guess I don't worry too much about long-term investment here because now I know what to do and I can go do this somewhere else. You know, someday when I move on from here, I'm not too worried if I leaving behind what I've built because I think somebody else can take advantage of that and take themselves to the next level, so it doesn't really bother me.
And it sounds like they kind of had a land stewardship ethic, so that they must enjoy what you're doing here.
Yeah, they're very happy seeing what we've done and what's happening with the land and the soil.
We're standing here in Stearns County, the number one dairy county in the state of Minnesota. You feel like you're kind of being able to hit your stride financially. Have you ever done a comparison of what is costing you to, or kind of what your return on investment is and what's it costing you to produce milk compared to if you were conventional or, what some of the conventional farmers in the area might be?
I haven't done one in the last maybe 6 months, but the ones we've done in the past, we could produce milk at almost half the cost of what other producers can. What it comes down to is that conventional milk price is a roller coaster, and you don't know what you're going to get. So,
because you are selling into the conventional market
for another 3 months.
Oh,
yeah.
Are you going into organics or?
Yes. Yep. In May we should be on with Organic Valley.
Okay. So that'll make a difference.
Yes.
Well, one of the things I was looking at your case study that struck me was, and I think this is, to me, from the other regenerative farms I've been on, this is a real important focus, is to not focus so much on productivity, but on return on investment and what you're the profit you're getting. That high yields don't, and this is true in corn, it's true in dairy, it's true in all aspects of agriculture. High yields don't necessarily equate to high profits. So you've really looked at things like, I think, like you're milking once a day now, and there's some other things where you are maybe getting lower productivity and lower yield, but you feel like your return is higher.
Yeah, it's like the saying, production is vanity, profit is sanity. So yeah, we ship quite a bit less milk per cow than the average producer. And like you said, yeah, we're doing once a day. I kind of have a rule that if I spend $1, it has to make me $2, because not everything that the salesman sells you will work like they say it will. And I'm not into those things where spend $1, you make $1.10. I don't do that. So we just have a focus on making just good quality, high brix forages, putting as much forage as we can through the cow. Typically we don't do, not that we're in any kind of market that prohibits us from using grain, but usually we don't use grain because I just don't see enough return. It's just like we're trading dollars. And then there's the cow health things that come along with that. If we can push our cows less, and even if they milk, if they milk less, but our replacement rate is 10% less or 15% less, that's money in my pocket if I don't have to raise those extra heifers or if I can expand, or if I can sell heifers or whatever, cows. So I have much more of I think it's more of like a long-term strategy, trying to think out 10 years in advance rather than trying to make as much milk as I can to pay the co-op bill this month. Yeah, I'm not into that.
It seems like you have the flexibility, because you don't have a huge investment in facilities, infrastructure, that type of thing, that when milk prices really do take a nosedive, you can cull some cows, you can kind of shift things around a little bit, and you're not tied into, oh man, I've got to pump so much milk through this facility because I spent this amount of money on it and I'm going to be paying this forever kind of thing.
Yeah, we're really limited on facilities and equipment. The facilities we have, pretty much just a milking facility. As far as cow housing, most of the time we outwinter. If it gets really miserable, I have a shed that I can pack the milk cows into if I need to. And as far as equipment, the only thing I own is a loader tractor and a bale and roller, a 3-point bale and roller. And I have no interest in other equipment. I don't like the maintenance that comes with them. I don't like things that rust, rot, and depreciate. So I just try and keep things really simple. And I think there's a lot of custom guys out there with fancy equipment they want to justify. So if they want to come and do, come and do work for me, then that's just fine.
You've got a driveway that they can drive in and do it.
Exactly.
Tell me more about why milking once a day, why that's working for you.
Well, I've been reading about it for probably 10 years, and there's a lot of data coming out of New Zealand and Ireland. I thought, well, if they can do it here, that should work here, even though the climate's a little different. And we'd been messing around with milking once a day late lactation for probably 5 years, because we like to dry off our cows in really good shape, so we could put them on cheap feed, so they can just maintain right until they calve. Because we make about half our hay and we buy about half our hay. So I make good quality hay and I buy low quality hay for what I need for my winter needs. And another reason we do this is I read a study several years ago where they took 2 groups of dry beef cows that were in their 3rd trimester, and they split them. Then they fed one a high energy low fiber ration. They fed one a low energy low fiber ration. The other 2 separate groups. And the calves out of the cows with the low energy high fiber ration lived longer, had lifetime higher body condition, higher breed back, and better forage conversion. So we thought, well, why wouldn't it work with our dairy cows? So that's the reason we started doing that once a day late lactation. And then it just got to the point with our milking setup here and a young family, and I'd play around with the numbers and kept coming up pretty close. So then one day we just said, all right, well, let's do it, and we did it, and I'm very glad we did.
And that's year round.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. We've done 2 short stints where we milked twice a day for a while, when I started second guessing myself, two 6-week stints. But no, I think we're set on once a day now. It just makes the most sense.
What breeds are you of cows do you have?
So most of them are some form of a Jersey and Fleckvieh cross. We really like those. We put a little Norwegian red in the last couple years, and those look pretty good too. Now the last couple years we've been mostly just homebred bulls of our own mix. So we'll probably keep doing that. I think the epigenetics are too important to ignore. So, and AI is just labor and time and from genetics halfway across the world that I don't know for sure if they're going to work in my system. So.
Right. Well, and that's a key point, is that you really need to, it sounds like you really focus on it's different having a cow that's set up for a conventional system. A grazing dairy cow is a different animal altogether, and you really do have to breed for that. It sounds like you've really worked on that. Yeah,
it's been our biggest focus the last couple of years, is developing cows that fit the farm. And as we go farther down this path, we see it's kind of an interesting way to think about the cows are literally becoming part of the farm, and they're adapted to the forages we have and our management style. And doesn't mean they couldn't work somewhere else. They've just the efficiency of the cow seems to be improving, and their ability to stick around, and it's really been a big change.
Going back a little bit, but before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about we've had such an open winter and problems people might have with winter kill, with alfalfa, that type of thing. And you said one of the things you've seen, you feel like as you built up your soil health, that issues like that really aren't something you really worry about. That you feel like they're just more, the plants are more resilient, it sounds like, or that they're just really able to kind of roll with the punches a little bit?
Just the whole system's more resilient. Yeah, as we've developed soil health and improved our soil biology, we see the plants growing later in the fall, starting earlier in the spring. I mean, it takes a heck of a hard frost to knock our grasses and legumes out. It used to be, get down to 28 degrees and they were done. Yeah. And now we can get several frost in the mid-20s and they're unaffected. I think it's just more sugars in the plant, and the biology is keeping everything warmer. I mean, there's a lot of biological biomass in the 6 inches that's living and breathing, and I would say that's where our biggest changes come from.
What about water management? I know you have irrigation here, but Minnesota, and I know this part of Minnesota, at least for the last 2 years, has gone through kind of an unprecedented drought, and now we're in a winter drought because we didn't get the snow that we needed. But do you feel like you're able to, building that soil health helped you kind of better make use of any moisture that does come around?
So we've actually been pretty dry here for about 3 years, pretty equal amounts. Last summer was the driest, actually, but the other 2 summers were quite dry. And we've actually been using less irrigation each year as the soil health improves. And I think part of it, we're figuring out how to manage that irrigation water a little better. But it just seems like the grass and the forages just need less. And I think that's several things as soil aggregation improves, as the diversity improves. I'm sure we're building up our mycorrhizal fungi. I know we are. So that's helping water move around more effectively and keep plants healthy. So it does seem like, and I think just heard something about this recently too. Once your plants are healthier, they do a much more effective job of capturing dew. So I think we've been seeing that as well.
You're really committed to, you've just seen the benefits of the more regenerative system, and sounds like you're really committed to it, and it's kind of starting to hit its stride, both kind of ecologically and agronomically and economically for you. Has there been are you able to a situation where you're able to look back and go, oh, there's some mistakes I made? Or did it all just go pretty smoothly? I guess, is there some things that you were like, I wish I could have did that differently, or some real pitfalls that you had there?
Yeah, we've made some big mistakes, some expensive ones. Took me 2 tries to learn that you have to buy the right cows you want. 2 different times I bought cows because I thought they were convenient because they were there. I thought, they graze some as heifers, or I'm not going to ask them to graze too much. At one farm, I thought, we'll just graze 30% and do TMR for the rest, and just big failure, big expensive failure. So we've definitely done that. We've cheaped out on hay. We've cheaped out on other things, and it's cost us a lot. So, but we don't make those mistakes anymore. We only had to make them once or maybe twice, and then now we're done.
You learn from them, and again, since you didn't have a huge investment in facilities, it wasn't like a business-ending mistake, it sounds like.
No, never were in. I shouldn't say that. We were never in danger of losing everything, but we were in big trouble in about 2018. That's when we really jumped head first down this regenerative stuff, because we kind of felt that was our only option, because we were handing so much money over to the co-op for protein supplements and diesel fuel for TMRs and things like that. We just had to make the switch, and that was somebody gave me a kick off the plank, and it was time to go. Yeah. Figure it out.
But yeah, how'd you get through that year?
Barely. It was mentally and financially difficult, but kind of we came to a breaking point where I just decided I had to do something different. We had a new baby at home, and we had to figure something out. And I had looked at the co-op bill, and I'm like, no, I can't do this anymore. And I went and I parked the mixer tractor and the TMR. I think I actually canceled the load of grain I had coming, and I just worked with what we had. We had baleage on hand. We had corn on hand. I cut the corn way back, so I didn't have to feed protein, added protein, and we just went, hay and protein. I bought some cheaper grassier hay, which is probably better for the cows than the rocket fuel we had. And we just started culling cows that didn't fit, and culled probably 30% of the herd over the next 6 months. And we kind of used that cash to dig ourselves out of that hole we were in. And it was really freeing, like the month after that, when I didn't have a new co-op bill. And then I started feeling better about the situation we were in, and when I realized, I'm just not creating these big holes.
Do you have a sense of roughly, and it's going to vary so much from farm to farm and the condition of the soil and all that, but how long would it take somebody to start to see some real changes in their soil health when they start to build the regenerative aspects of it?
You can see real change year one. It can happen. It happens if I like the saying, you need to be intentional, not intentional-ish. If you're intentional with following the soil health principles, you will see changes year one. You'll see earthworms start to come back. Once you have that armor built on the soil And I always think the armor is the one that always, to me, once that's built, you're capturing moisture and you're allowing your biology not to cook out.
Do you have any advice for somebody who, either in dairying or any type of agriculture, who might be looking into doing something like, well, let's just focus on livestock, I guess, regenerative grazing, that type of thing? I mean, what would be some of the, it can be a really hard transition, especially if you've been doing it the conventional way for several years, or your family has, and maybe you're renting land and you're not sure what if you're going to be having that lease the next year, that kind of thing. Do you have any advice for how somebody could kind of at least start to get started in an area like this?
I'm a big fan of education, and I don't mean university education. I mean Soil Health Academy, maybe holistic management, something like that. And they can help you understand your context, and you can see examples of it out in the field. I would think that's a really big one. And the next is just get on people's farms and talk to people. Pick up the phone, talk to people. Everybody in this space is so friendly, and they've been in the same cruddy situations that you're in, and they're more than happy to help you. If you really want to listen and you really want to make a change, they're more than happy to. They don't want to. A lot of them are real, people that are really doers. So they're not gonna. If you're gonna, screw around and not make something happen or he and hot around, they're not gonna help. But if you're a doer and they can see that, they'll help you.
So, like I mentioned before, we're standing in Stearns County, the number one dairy county in the state. The news in dairy right now is not good. We've lost a record number of farmers in Minnesota and in Wisconsin and other dairy states, and it's just really difficult. We're seeing a lot of young, really good farmers go out of business. We're seeing, people who are in the middle part of their career, dairy farming career, just kind of calling it quits, and then a lot of people retiring, and nobody's there to take over. I mean, how old are you, Derek?
I just turned 30 on Sunday.
Oh, happy birthday. So you're a young farmer, and I mean, how do you feel, I guess in general, about being in the dairy business? That it might surprise a lot of people that you are in the dairy business at your age, and you feel that it sounds like you kind of maybe see a future, but I don't want to speak for you. How do you feel right now?
I'm just more stubborn than most of them. I think there's a future. I do see a split in the industry, I think, where there's going to be, you can go ahead and produce that race to the bottom conventional product, which I have no problem if somebody wants to do that. It doesn't bother me. And honestly, if there was a price, we knew we were going to get a contract price, I'd probably stay conventional, because there's a lot of opportunity in the conventional world. But I think it's going to split to more niche products. It's going to be, the conventional world or the niche world. Where I see a lot of future is in regenerative type products. We've done a little testing on phytonutrients and what we can do with our regenerative, even compared to organic grazing farms that are, I would call them conventional organic farms. The quality of our milk compared to theirs, and not that this is a competition, but I think there's a future in that space.
Do you think there's going to be markets for anything like paying farmers for taking care of the environment, that kind of thing, sequestering carbon, or that? Is that something you've looked into at all, or have people been talking about that? Yeah,
there's a lot of talk about it, and it's out there. I don't know if there's really reliable ways to actually measure that. And I would rather, from what we've seen going down just on this farm, being very regenerative for the last 4 years, the more, I guess you could say, like ecologically friendly we are, and the more we take care of our soil, the better our product is by large margins. So I don't know if that has to be paid for. If the farmer could just get paid for their quality product, they're going to want to make the changes themselves. Yeah. The power of that comes through our diversity that we have, and it's these native forbs that are starting to pop in, and I believe that's where that's coming from.
Well, it sounds like you're kind of having fun.
I've never done anything more fun than this.
And you have, what is it, 3 small children or
Yes.
something? So sounds like you maybe see it, who knows if they'll choose to farm or whatever, we don't know what kids do, but that you feel like you're able to give them a positive experience out there on the land.
Mm-hmm. There's no better place to raise a kid than on a farm, so the kids just love it. They can have their pets and play in the mud, and that's my favorite thing. I think that's my favorite thing about this type of farming that we do, is it's so much safer for children. We don't have the equipment flying through the yard. We don't have jugs of pesticides around, or the worst thing that could happen is fall in a pile of manure. So it's just a great, healthy, safe environment to raise kids in.
more information on regenerative grazing and the Regenerative Livestock Symposium being held at the University of Minnesota, see the podcast page for Ear to the Ground episode 330 at landstewardshipproject.org. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-816-9342. By the way, it helps us greatly if you can give Ear to the Ground a rating on whatever podcast platform you utilize. And word of mouth is the best way to spread the news about our podcast. If you like what you hear, tell at least one person about LSP's Ear to the Ground. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.